The slave market on planet Zircon 5 was loud and full of shouting. Buyers from across the galaxy walked through the dusty paths between cages. Strange lights flickered above, and the air smelled like fear and metal. But in one corner, far from the main auction stage, was a cage that no one dared to approach. Inside that cage sat a wild alien woman, tall and fierce, with glowing red eyes and long tangled hair that moved like shadowy smoke. Her hands were cuffed in thick metal, and her feet were chained to the floor. She growled at anyone who looked at her. Her clothes were torn, her arms bruised, but her spirit was not broken. Every time a buyer stepped close, she snarled like an animal. Some said she had killed 3 guards during transport. The alien king himself had ordered her captured. He called her the savage from the fire plains and claimed she was too dangerous for his court. So he put her up for sale to the highest bidder, or the bravest fool. No one wanted her until the human arrived. He was not dressed like a royal, nor armed like a hunter. He wore simple boots, a dusty coat, and a calm expression. His name was Elias, a trader from Earth, and he walked through the market like he had all the time in the world. He passed the golden cages of dancers and the colorful pens of exotic pets. But then he stopped in front of her cage. The guards warned him with smirks. She bites. One said, "Last man who got close lost his nose." Elias didn't laugh. He looked at her, straight into her red, glowing eyes. She didn't growl this time. She only stared back, confused, almost curious. He stepped even closer, ignoring the guards, and crouched down. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She didn't answer. Her chains rattled as she shifted, watching him closely like a wild cat ready to strike. The alien king, seated above on his throne of bone and steel, saw the human and shouted with amusement, "You Earthman, you wish to die?" Elias stood and looked up. "No," he said calmly. "I wish to buy her." The crowd went silent. Everyone stared at him as if he were mad. The king leaned forward, laughing. "She's untamable, violent, dangerous. Why waste? Your money? I'll pay triple the asking price," Elias replied. The guards looked shocked. Even the scribes paused their recordings. The king narrowed his eyes. "You truly want her?" "Yes," Elias said, not looking away from the chained woman. The king shrugged and waved his hand. "Then she is yours. But don't cry when she tears out your throat." The guards moved in fast, unlocking the chains with weapons ready in case she attacked. But something strange happened. She didn't resist. She didn't fight. She stood up slowly, her eyes locked on Elias, and walked forward like a quiet storm. The crowd gasped as she stepped outside the cage, barefoot and bruised but proud. Elias didn't chain her. He didn't even touch her. He simply turned and walked toward his ship, and she followed. No one could understand why. No one could explain how a wild alien woman followed a human without force. The king frowned as he watched them disappear through the crowd. Something about that human felt different. Inside the ship, she looked around with tense shoulders. She had never seen such clean walls, such quiet halls. No chains, no guards, just silence. Elias offered her a blanket. She knocked it away. He offered food. She threw it across the room. He didn't yell. He didn't try to tame her that night. She sat in a corner, wrapped in her own arms. Elias sat on the opposite side, reading something on a datapad. He didn't even look at her. She watched him from the shadows. No. Chains no, orders no, fear in his eyes. It made her nervous. What kind of creature shows kindness without demand? What kind of man buys a slave but refuses to treat her like one? Her heart beat fast, confused by the silence, by the strange calm that filled this new space. For the first time in her life, she was free to run, yet she didn't. Something inside her told her to wait, to watch, to understand this human, because deep in her heart, she knew this story was not over. It was just beginning, and Elias might be the first being who didn't see her as a weapon or a wild thing, but as someone worth saving. Even if she didn't believe it yet, she couldn't take her eyes off him, and for the first time, her growl was silent because deep down, she didn't feel like a beast anymore. she felt something else. Something. She didn't yet have words for it. Whatever it was, it scared her more than any chain ever had. She stood in the corner of his ship, like a statue made of fire and storm, arms crossed, red eyes watching his every move. The metal cuffs were gone, but her muscles were still tight, like she expected chains to return at any moment. Past her slowly, setting warm food on the table, placing folded clothes on the bunk, and then stepping back without a word. She didn't touch the food, she didn't take the clothes, she didn't speak when he turned his back. She growled, not loud, but sharp enough to make her point. She would not obey him. She was not tamed. Elias looked over his shoulder and raised an eyebrow. "You're not a prisoner here." She didn't care what he said. His kind had lied before. Kind words were just sugar before the chain that night. She tore the blanket he had given her into strips and tied them around her arms like armor. She made no bed. She slept on the cold floor near the door, her eyes never fully closing. The next morning, she threw the food at the wall. The plate shattered, and stew ran down the side like blood. Elias only glanced up from his seat and sighed quietly. He didn't shout, he didn't punish her, he just started cleaning it up. That confused her the most when she attacked before. Others hit her, shocked her, beat her into silence, but this man just picked up the broken plate and said, "I'll make more." She growled again, trying to scare him. He didn't even flinch later. When the ship landed on a trade outpost for supplies, Elias stepped out alone and left the ramp open. She stood at the door, staring at the open sky, the crowd beyond, the chance to run. She didn't move. She didn't know why, but something pulled her back. She stepped outside, not to escape but to follow from a rooftop. An alien scout saw her and whispered into a communicator. Target found. The savage female is alive and walking free. Within minutes, armed mercenaries surrounded the alley behind the supply shop where Elias stood. Blasters raised, armor gleaming, they shouted one order: hand her over. Elias didn't hesitate. He stepped in front of her, his hands raised between her and the guns. "She's under my protection," he said. The mercenaries laughed. "She's property of the Fire King, not yours. Move or bleed." But Elias didn't move. He took out a small device from his coat and tapped it twice. A warning tone echoed, and the Aliyah defense system had just activated. The mercenaries paused, then one aimed to fire in a flash. Elias pulled his blaster and dropped the attacker with a single clean shot. The others backed away slowly, growling threats but retreating. She stood frozen. No one had ever protected her like that, not for gain. Not for money, not for power. He risked his life and didn't ask for anything in return. Later that night, she sat by the bunk, staring at him across the room. He was fixing the lights, tools spread around him. Humming softly to himself, she crawled forward on her knees. Quiet like a shadow, she reached out and touched his jacket, not to hurt, but to be sure he was really Elias. Looked at her, surprised but calm. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded slowly. He smiled, just a little, still not hungry. This time, she didn't throw the food. She took the bowl with both hands and ate in silence, not like a beast, but like someone who had been starving for more than just food. He gave her space. He gave her warmth, but more than that, he gave her choice no one ever had. In the middle of the night, she sat beside him as he slept in his chair. She stared at his face, so calm, so peaceful. Her fingers trembled as she reached toward his hand, but didn't touch it. She wasn't ready, not yet, but something inside her had shifted. She no longer wanted to run. She no longer needed to growl. And for the first time in her life, she wanted to understand what made this human so different, because whatever it was changing her too, and that terrified her more than any cage ever had. The sky outside was dark purple when she slipped out of the ship. No alarms, no chains, no locked doors. Elias had left the ramp open again. She stood there for a long time, one foot outside, one inside. Her eyes scanned the quiet landing bay, the shadows between the ships, the freedom just a few steps away. She ran, not because she hated him, not because he hurt her, but because she didn't understand him. Why didn't he chain her like the others? Why didn't he force her to serve? Why did his silence make her heart ache more than the whips ever did? She needed to breathe, to think, to run without being followed. She vanished into the streets of the alien city. her steps silent, her eyes sharp. She moved like a ghost through narrow alleys and dim-lit tunnels. The cold wind cut through her thin clothes, but she didn't stop. She climbed rooftops, watched markets from shadows, avoided guards and drunk traders. She wanted to forget the ship, the man, the strange way he looked at her like she was more than a creature, but she couldn't. His face kept flashing in her mind. That quiet voice, those steady hands, the way he stood in front of guns without blinking her. Heart beat faster, too fast. She clenched her fists and growled low. No, she would not feel. She would not change. Then she heard footsteps for men's thick boots, fast steps. Wrong scent. She ducked into an alley, but they were already there, pretty little. Beast, one of them whispered, his voice sharp like broken glass. You're worth a fortune. She showed her teeth. They laughed. One stepped forward. She warned him with a growl. He pulled out a shock collar. She leapt. The fight was fast but brutal. She didn't hold back. Teeth, claws, fists, whatever it took. They screamed, they begged. She didn't stop until blood soaked the stones. Only one crawled away, broken and bleeding. She let him go with a message. Tell the king he doesn't own me anymore. Then she turned back. Her chest burned with rage, but her legs moved on their own. Not toward the wild, not toward the mountains, but back toward the ship, toward him. She didn't know why, but she didn't want to be alone anymore. Alice was sitting at the edge of the ship's ramp, head down, hands folded. He didn't look surprised when she appeared, barefoot and covered in blood. He just stood up slowly and looked at her. She dropped the broken alien body at his feet. Followed me, she said. Voice low. He nodded once, then looked at her hands. She was shaking. He didn't ask why she left. He didn't ask what she did. He only took her hand and pulled her inside. He cleaned her wounds with warm water. She hissed. He didn't stop. She sat still like a stone while he wrapped her arms with soft cloth. No one had ever touched her like that. Not gentle, not patient, not human. Her eyes stayed on his face, looking for judgment. I'll tell thee. Waiting for fear, but he only said one thing next time. Don't run alone. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She didn't know what to say. She had never been scolded so kindly. She didn't know what to call the heat rising in her chest when he touched her shoulder. It wasn't pain, it wasn't fear, it was something else that night. She didn't sleep on the floor. She sat on the edge of the bed, watching him fix the broken panel near the wall. When he turned to look at her, she didn't look away. He offered her clean clothes again this time. She took them. She still didn't speak much, still didn't smile, still kept her back to the wall when she slept. But something had changed. She had run. She had bled. She had returned, not because she had to, but because part of her didn't want to be anywhere else, and that scared her. More than anything, she had survived monsters. Wars, cages, kings, but this human with no chains and no demands, he was the first to break through the walls she built. And she didn't know if she was strong enough to stop him more, if she even wanted to. The days passed like silent wind through space. She no longer growled when he entered the room. She didn't flinch when he got close. Sometimes she sat beside him, not too near, but not far either. Elias never forced her to speak. He didn't ask about her past. He only fixed the ship, made warm meals, and left the door open. She watched him every night, his hands working, his shoulders tired, his breath steady. He was strong, but not like a warrior. His strength was quieter, deeper. It made her feel strange inside. She was still learning how to feel without fear, still learning how to live without chains then. The fire came. It was supposed to be a simple job. Drop off supplies at a border outpost, then leave. When they landed, the outpost was already burning. Smoke filled the air. The ground shook. Screams echoed from every corner. Raiders, mercenaries wearing black armor stormed the place, killing anything that moved. Elias grabbed his blaster and pulled her close. We don't have to get involved, he said. But when they saw a small alien child trapped under debris, Iran, she followed without thinking. They lifted the child together, carried him to cover. Then, more shots rang out. More soldiers came. Elias turned and fired back fast. Sharp, perfect aim. She fought beside him, her body moving like lightning, but then one shot came from the side. She saw it before he did. She pushed him. The blast hit her arm. He turned. Fired again. They barely made it out. The child survived. The raiders ran, but Elias didn't get away cleaning. The chaos. He had taken a hit to the chest, now he lay on the cold floor of the ship. Pale, blood leaking through his shirt, she dropped to her knees beside him. "Don't close your eyes," she said, her voice cracking. He tried to smile, but it hurt too much. "I'm fine," he whispered. But his hands were cold. She pressed both her palms on his chest, trying to stop the bleeding, trying to hold in the life that was slipping you. "Can't die," she said. Louder now, "You can't leave me." To her hands trembled. Her face came close to his. She didn't care about pride, didn't care about fear. She was begging. "Please, stay alive," she whispered, tears burning her cheeks. "I don't want to be alone again." She didn't realize she was crying until a drop hit his face. His eyes opened slowly. He saw her face so close. So raw, not wild or angry, just broken. He raised one hand and touched her cheek with his bloody fingers. "You're not alone," he said. Then he passed out. She screamed for the ship's med unit, dragged him to the healing pod, slapped the control panel with shaking hands. Lights blinked, systems hummed, machines hissed. She sat beside the pod all night, knees to her chest, watching the glass like it was her last hope. Every beep of the monitor became her heartbeat. She didn't move, she didn't sleep, she didn't speak, just waited. When morning came, the pod opened slowly, steam rolled out his chest. Rosie was alive. She covered her mouth with both hands, breathing hard. He blinked at her from inside the pod. "I'm still here," said weakly. She let out a sound, part laugh, part sob band. Fell to her knees again. She didn't know what to call the feeling in her chest. It wasn't fear, it wasn't anger, it was something deeper, something warmer. That night, she sat beside him, not on the edge of the bed, but right beside him. Her hand brushed his. He didn't pull away. Neither did she. "I've killed for survival," she whispered, "but this time I almost killed myself for you." Elias looked at her quietly. "You didn't have to, I know," she said. "That's why it scares me for the first time." Her voice shook, not from rage, but from something she never thought she'd feel. Real care for a human, for the only person who ever looked at her like she was more than a weapon, more than a beast. He smiled softly. "You saved me," she leaned in, her fingers gently touching his face. "Don't make me do it again," she said. Done this time. There was no growl in her voice, only truth and the beginning of something she had never known before, love. The sky above their ship turned black before the storm. The air trembled, and distant thunder rolled through the mountains of the trade moon. But this was no natural storm. This was something else. She felt it. First, her body froze, her breath shortened. Her heart pounded in her chest like a drum of warning. She stepped outside the ship and looked toward the sky. Flashes of light blinked in the clouds. Then giant shadows broke through. Warships, 3 of them, dark, heavy, cruel in shape. She knew them well. The king had come back inside the ship. Elias checked the scanners. His face stayed calm, but his hand tightened around his belt. He looked at her. "You know whose ships those are?" said. She nodded slowly. "He's come for me." Elias didn't flinch. "He'll leave with nothing." She wanted to believe him, but she had seen what the king did to those who disobeyed. He would not come to talk, he would come to take. The ship trembled again as the first wave of soldiers landed near. Borealis stepped out the ramp with his blaster. Ready, she followed this time, not behind him, but beside him. My voice echoed from a floating drone above them. "You have something that belongs to the Fire King." Elias answered without fear. "She belongs to no one." The drone's voice grew sharper. "You have 10 minutes to surrender the female. We burn your ship to the ground." Before Elias could reply, she stepped forward. "No," she said, "I'll speak to him myself." Elias grabbed her arm gently. "You don't have to. I do." She interrupted. She walked out to the open landing field, where a throne-shaped hovercraft descended slowly. The Fire King sat on it, wrapped in black armor, a crown of scorched bone on his head. His face twisted in amusement when he saw her. "You lived," he said with a cold smile. "Even better, you obeyed the human long enough to survive." She didn't kneel. She didn't lower her eyes. She stood tall, her voice steady. "I didn't obey him. I chose to stay." The king laughed, his voice loud and cruel. "And you think that matters? I created you, trained you, caged you. I own you not anymore," she said. He raised his hand. "Then prove it. Fight me for your freedom." Gasps spread through the crowd. Even Elias tensed at her side. The king stood from his throne, stepping onto the field with a massive blade. In his hand, her body trembled not from fear, but from the memory of pain. This man had beaten her, broken her, sold her like a beast-stand. Now he wanted to drag her back, not to chain her, but to destroy what she had become. Ela stepped forward. "I'll fight for her." He said. She grabbed his wrist. "No, this is not your fight," he whispered, her eyes locked on the king. "But it is my war." She stepped onto the field. "Bare hands? No blade?" The king laughed again. "You still fight with nothing?" Pathetic, but she wasn't alone anymore. She had something now that the king never gave her. Purposeth. Fight began. The king swung fast. Heavy, brutal. She dodged, ducked, rolled, her feet moving with the speed of survival. Elias watched from the edge, heart pounding with every strike. She fought like fire, but the king was larger, stronger, crueler. He struck her shoulder. Blood poured. He kicked her down. She gritted her teeth and rose again, and again she stood. Every fall made her slower, but her eyes never lost their fire. Finally, the king raised his blade for the final strike. Then he stopped. Sharp sound cut the air. She had grabbed the blade with her bare hand. Blood dripped from her fingers, but she held it tightened. Then she twisted the blade, snapped. The king stared at her in shock. She roared, jumped, and slammed both fists into his chest. He hit the ground hard. Breath knocked out, armor cracked. She stood over him, chest heaving, blood running down her arm. "I am not your weapon," she said. "I am not your property." Then she turned away, not to run, but to return to the man who gave her the strength to stand. Elias caught her as she stumbled. Holding her close, soldiers around them lowered their weapons. Unsure what to do, the king lay on the ground, humiliated. His army. Silentalias looked into her eyes. "You didn't just fight for freedom, you claimed it." She nodded weakly, but she didn't collapse, not yet, because the war wasn't just with the king. It was still going inside her heart. And only one man had the power to help her win that battle. It's the one who never asked her to change, but changed her anyway. The king was gone, but his fury remained. 3 days after his defeat, fire rained down from the sky. His warships, furious with shame, returned without him. This time with no challenge, no warning, only one mission: to burn everything. She woke. First to the alarmalies, rose to the sound of explosions outside. But before he could reach for his gear, she was already at the ship's hatch. Hair flying behind her, eyes glowing with fire. She turned to him once, just once. "You stay," she said. "This time I lead." Elias wanted to stop her, but he knew she was already too far beyond fear. She wasn't the same woman he first met in chains. She was something more now, something unstoppable. She ran into the battlefield like lightning. The raiders thought she would be weak, thought the fight with the king had drained her. They were wrong. She fought with hands and teeth, claws and fury. One by one they fell around her. Other survivors on the moon saw her charging alone and followed soon. A dozen aliens stood at her back, then 2 dozen, then more. She didn't ask for help. She inspired it, because in that moment, she wasn't just a freed slave. She was a symbol. The human watched from the ridge, fixing a broken cannon with one hand, clutching his side with the other. Every time she took a hit, he flinched. Every time she screamed, he whispered her name. The battle stretched into hours. Fire lit the skies. Ships fell. Buildings cracked. She didn't stop until she did. It happened fast. A blast from behind, a scream from her lips. Her body slammed into the ground, dust rising all around. She tried to stand. Her legs wouldn't move her. Arms shook too much to lift her blade. The fire in her chest suddenly turned to ice. She looked around. The battle wasn't over. Her people were still fighting, still screaming, still needing her, but she couldn't rise. Her strength was gone in for the first time since the cage. Fear crept back into her bones. His voice moved away from her. "Elias," said he. Had dropped from the ridge, rifle in hand, blood on his forehead, coat torn at the shoulder. He didn't wait for orders, didn't care about odds. He ran straight to her side and stood over her like a shield. The raiders fired. He fired back. He shook, knocked him back. But he didn't fall. Each blast he blocked came closer to her body. But he didn't let them pass when his blaster overheated. He grabbed a broken pipe and swung like a soldier from Earth's ancient stories. The battlefield paused, the wild woman and moving, the human roaring, and then Finally, help arrived. At the survivors she had led formed a circle. Blasters raised rage in their eyes together. It pushed the raiders back together. They ended it when it was over. Elias collapsed beside her, his chest. Heaving, her fingers reached for his hand. Weak but still alive. You're bleeding. She whispered. So are you, he answered. Smiling through the pain, she tried to sit up. Full tears filled her eyes. But not from pain, from anger. I said I would lead, she said, and you did. He replied, now let me carry you home. He lifted her gently, arms under her knees, and shoulders. Her head rested against his chest, heart still pounding around them. The fires burned low, the sky began to clear, and the stars returned inside the ship. He laid her down softly. She looked up at him, face pale, breath short. Am I broken again? She asked. He knelt beside her, brushed her hair from her face. No. He whispered, you're just tired. Her lips trembled. I didn't want you to see me weak. I didn't fall in love with your strength. He said, I fell in love with your heart. Her eyes widened. She had never heard those words before, not from a master, not from a soldier, not from anyone, only from Himtha. One who never asked her to be anything but herself, and right now herself was broken, bruised, breathless, but still alive, still his. The room was quiet, lit only by soft lights from the ship's med bay. Machines blinked gently, monitoring every breath she took. The battle was over. The fires had stopped. But inside her body, different kind of war was still being fought. She hadn't moved in 2 days. Elias never left her side. He slept in the chair beside her, holding her hand like it was the last thread keeping him alive. He cleaned her wounds, he whispered to her when no one was listening. Every time her chest rose, he smiled just a little more, but she didn't wake not. Until now, her fingers twitched, her head turned slightly, then her eyes opened slowly. Like sunlight breaking through heavy clouds, she stared at the ceiling, confused. Then she felt its warmth. Pressure. She looked down. Her hand was in his. Elias sat beside her, half asleep, but when her fingers moved, he jolted up. You're awake. He breathed, eyes wide. Voice cracking, she tried to speak, but her throat was dry. He rushed to get her water, helping her sit up gently. She took a sip, then looked at him with tired but steady eyes. You didn't leave. She whispered, I never planned to. He said. She looked down at her arms, wrapped in bandages, her legs bruised, but healing, her chest still aching, but strong. I failed. She said. He shook his head. No, you. When I fell, she said again, voice low, you stood long enough to make others rise. He replied, that's what leaders do. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them with a question on her lips. Is the king gone? He left, Elias said, but his army scattered. They fear you now. I don't want to be feared anymore. She said. He reached into his coat, pulled something small, quiet and golden. I know. He said softly, that's why I want you to be loved. He held it up between them, ring simple. Clean, warmed by his touch, she stared at it. Her breath catching, her heart began to beat faster, but not from fear this time, from something else. Why? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. He smiled. But his hands were shaking now, because when I first saw you, I didn't see a beast. I saw someone fighting to be free. Then I saw someone learning to feel, then someone who saved lives. Even when her own was breaking, and somewhere along the way, he added, looking into her glowing eyes, I fell in love with all of that. Tears filled her eyes, but they didn't fall yet. She looked at the ring, then at him. I don't know how to be a wife. She said. You don't have to, he whispered. You just have to be mine. She didn't answer with words. She lifted her hand slowly, placed it in his open palm, and no to just once say. Tear rolled down her cheek. He caught it with his thumb and kissed her fingers. The ring slipped onto her hand, light as air, but heavier than any chain she ever worn. For the first time in her life she cried, not from pain, not from fear, but from something soft, something safe, something she thought she'd never have. Peace. Later that night, she stood by the ship's window, wrapped in a warm cloak, her body healing slowly. Elias stepped beside her. Where do we go now? She asked. Anywhere you want, said. You're free. She took his hand. No, I'm home. He looked at her, stunned in, then she smiled. Not the smile of a warrior, not the smirk of a survivor, but a real, soft smile, because the wild alien. A woman who once lived in chains now stood beside the man who never tried to tame her hand. The stars beyond the window had never looked brighter.